Hello, I hope you're doing well. I've not posted a long form video on here in way too long, so I'm so excited to sit down today and talk to you. I've been working on revitalizing my approach to YouTube. I've had a lot of inspiration and direction from what people are telling me they want to see on this platform. So today we're discussing something I've been asked about constantly recently. I've been increasing my focus on and talking more about fitness. And a lot of people have been asking me how I got to the physique and level of fitness that I have right now. Today we're breaking down that entire story. This is more of a story time than it is like a how-to guide. It's about my experience with athletics, my experience with training, and how that's changed my athletic abilities, my strength, speed, endurance, my body, and my mindset over time. There will definitely be some lessons for you from my successes, from my failures, and I hope that you take them and do amazing things with them. All of this started when I was very young. When I was about 4 years old, my parents put me into martial arts classes, to karate. And it was for kids, it was like a very light version of karate, but it was training in some form. There were calisthenics, very, very light calisthenics, but some calisthenics, a little bit of running, a little bit of punching, kicking, all the classic martial arts things you can think of. That quickly changed into Taekwondo, which was even more focused on general fitness, philosophy about combat sports, and kicking in particular. But having good cardiovascular fitness, having good basic calisthenic strength, these things were priorities from the time that I was 4 years old. While I was doing Taekwondo when I was 5 years old, I saw my dad training in the garage. He was doing calisthenics. He's always been an athlete. He's an incredible athlete still to this day. And my dad's always been one of my biggest role models. So I saw him doing this in the garage, doing push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and I was like, can you teach me how to do this? Like, I want to be like you. I want to do what you're doing. Can you show me what you're doing and tell me more about it? And him being an amazing dad, he was like, yeah, let's get you started. Like, let's show you the basics of this. Let me explain why I do it, about fitness, about how to be strong and fast and be fit for the things you need to do in life. And that started with just push-ups and sit-ups. Push-ups and sit-ups were my bread and butter for years, and they still are in many ways. I do them almost every day. Granted, they're in different forms now. I'll do other kinds of training as well. But if I don't have anything going on for training and I want to do something, I don't have any equipment, I'll just do push-ups and sit-ups. And I started when I was 5. I've been doing them consistently in some form ever since. During the period where I did combat sports up until age 11, I was also trying out team sports and I wasn't very good. I realized that hand-eye coordination and like handling a ball in any ball sport, that was not a strength of mine. Team coordination was cool. I liked training with people. I liked being around them and feeding off that social energy, that aspect of training that's communal. But I just wasn't good at baseball, basketball, soccer. I played an entire season of rec basketball. I think I was one of the best defenders in the league, but I didn't make a single basket. I didn't get a single point in the entire season. So that clearly wasn't my calling. When I was 10, I started running. That changed everything for me. It was a running club at my school. I was very lucky they had a club for that. We had a little gnarly track out back of the school, and in the mornings, if you were there early, they'd let you show up to this club and just like run around with your friends. It was so casual, so chill. I did not take it casual or chill for very long. I started getting competitive with myself, wanting to go faster, wanting to race my friends. And that's when I knew I was like, okay, maybe running is something I'm into. Maybe this is something that I'm good at, that I enjoy. And I think naturally I had some speed. I'm a larger person. I'm like 6'1", so I was a little bit taller than most kids. I put on muscle a little bit easier. I think my genetics and epigenetics contribute to that. But what really changed it was my mindset, was my drive to go do it and enjoy it and really push myself in some way. At 11 years old, I stopped doing combat sports and switched pretty much just to running. When I was 12, that changed and I started doing triathlon. This was the beginning of like a 4-year period that was the most competitive I've ever been in any sport ever. To the point where I was like building up my national profile in competition. I think I was ranked 10th in the nation at one point. That was the highest I ever got for my age and gender division. In the state of Florida where I grew up, I was consistently in the top 5 for my division. So I was competing at a high level, both because I had some initial strength and speed, but because I trained really hard and I was very competitive. During that time, I also started high school, and I joined the cross-country team. I was on varsity from freshman year onward. I was training hard with the cross-country team. I was training hard running on my own, swimming, cycling. It was a lot at one time. And I fell out of love with triathlon. It got too competitive. It got too intense. Because as much as I loved competing, it was still about the love of activity, of being out in the world, enjoying the weather, enjoying being outside, being with my friends who I was training with. And as it got to be more about showing up and winning and less about challenging myself and enjoying the experience with people I cared about, I stopped caring about the sport. I think taking it so seriously when I was so young made me like it less when I got older. It's still an amazing sport. I want to go do an Ironman at some point, but I fell out of love with competing at a high level and switched over just to doing cross country, doing the varsity team. It was very fun. I think I could have pushed myself harder, to be honest. My big failing point there if I want to call it that, was that I wasn't there for competition. I was there to enjoy myself, to love running, to be around great people, and that was my concern. I wasn't really trying to, win races. I was just out there trying to challenge myself and enjoy that process. I think that mindset came from being done with racing other people in triathlon, not enjoying that anymore, not enjoying the intensity of like, oh, I have to beat this person whenever I see them. Like, I have to win every race. When it came to running, I was running against myself. And I think to be great at that sport, especially at the high school level, you really have to want to win overall. You really have to want to push yourself and just crush the competition. I fully respect that. That is that Kobe Bryant intense, like super competitor mentality. I didn't have that. I still don't. And honestly, I think shifting from triathlon to running was a mindset change that stayed with me ever since. I'm really only interested in competing with myself. I want to be a better version of myself every day, and that's very easy to measure when it comes to running or other athletics. So I kept running, and at this point, I had never done strength training. Because I was so focused on endurance sports, I was really, really slim. I felt almost borderline sickly, especially during cross country season when I was training constantly. I weighed like 150 pounds and I was 6 feet tall. I wasn't fully underweight, but it wasn't great. And I also did one season of lightweight rowing. In lightweight rowing, you have to be under a certain weight. I think the weight was actually 150. So I had to be very, very light to row as a lightweight, which was difficult because I was tall. The one season of rowing was a great athletic challenge, but I definitely came out of it not feeling strong. I felt sickly. Honestly, that's the best word I can use. I just felt ill. So I really wanted to gain some strength. I wanted to fill out my frame. I wanted to be a fitter, more functional version of myself. Again, I talked to my parents and I said, hey, I really want to start weight training. Can you guys show me what to do? Because both my parents are amazing athletes and they have this experience, and I'm very lucky to be able to draw on their experience to inform my own. They showed me all the basic movements with no weight so I could practice form before getting into weighted exercise. So from the time I was about 16 until now and probably forever, I was doing weight training. I started this very young and I got strong very quickly. I think I build muscle naturally pretty fast. That I think has to do both with my initial genetics, but more so my epigenetics. Epigenetics, if you don't know, are the way that the environment interacts with your genes, and the environment in this case was me being very active from a very young age. Genes can be turned on or off depending on what your environment is like, and with me training constantly and being very active, I think that the muscle building and cardio building genes, if you want to call them that, most likely were more activated. This has not been substantiated by science in my own body. It's just what I think went on. I do have a degree in biology, so I think it's kind of well founded. But anyway, I started getting strong and I loved it. I put on some mass. I wasn't huge, I was like 160, 165, but I felt much better overall. So I felt healthier from a physique standpoint, I looked better, and I loved weightlifting. Then I moved on to college. I initially joined the triathlon team thinking I'd get back into the sport. I once again didn't love the sport. The community was super sweet, they were really good people, but I just wasn't enjoying competing. That led me to get more and more into weightlifting, and at this point it became bodybuilding. I did a couple massive bulks, and I ended up at around 190, which was huge for me. I'd never been that big, I'd never felt that strong before. It wasn't sustainable, but it was fun. Of course, that weight didn't stay on. I was down to like 175, 180-ish, and that was a pretty healthy weight for me. And I kind of just hung out there. I ran a little bit for cardio, I was weight training, I was enjoying myself immensely. In that same period of time, I actually did a half Ironman. I didn't really train for it, which was a very bad decision. But my dad wanted to do it, and he was like, do you want to do it with me? And I said, of course, like that's such a dream for me to do a race with my dad. And that was amazing. Like being out there on the course with him was one of the best days of my life. In terms of how my body felt, one of the worst days of my life because I really didn't follow the program. I didn't train. That was a huge learning moment for me in terms of mindset, understanding that training has tangible effects on performance. Really, really feeling that in terms of the pain that I experienced that day physically was significant in how I approached all my training moving forward and how I still do. But anyway, I was very fit, I was having a ton of fun, and then COVID happened. Gyms shut down, people weren't outside running, everyone was just freaked out, nobody knew what was going on. At first I was able to maintain some muscle mass because I had basic equipment at home, but it was really difficult to keep training the way I had been. It was impossible actually. And around this time I went vegan for like 3 months, and I didn't do it well. I didn't really focus on how to eat well and maintain my physique and my fitness and my health with that kind of food. My protein intake went all the way down and I got very sickly again. I was like down to 150. From 180 to 150 is crazy, but it happened and I was just not feeling good. And it was still COVID, and so I couldn't do too much aside from eat more and train where I could, and where I could was in my dorm room. I was doing school on Zoom and we had 15-minute breaks between classes, so I'd do 15-minute calisthenic sessions. I got back on creatine, back on protein powder. I started eating more, focusing more on getting enough food in my body, getting high quality protein in, and I built back up to around 160. Then the gym opened back up and my life changed once again. I was so happy to be able to train properly. I got in there right away. I was back on the weights. I was doing bodybuilding, but I realized I didn't love training for aesthetic. Training for aesthetic is incredibly difficult when it comes to the mental aspect because you're always looking at something you can improve and it can really impact your self-confidence. For a lot of people, it changes their relationship with food, it changes their relationship with their body. It can be very harmful. Luckily, I didn't have it that bad, but I definitely recognized that I was being super self-critical on a daily basis about my appearance. And nothing I ever did in terms of training, in terms of building my body, was ever enough for me to feel satisfied, for me to feel happy. So I switched my mindset and my goals to being performance oriented. That naturally led me toward powerlifting. Powerlifting is lifting for weight, so there's numbers attached to it. I could track it. It's squat, deadlift, and bench press, and a lot of accessory movements, of course, but those are the main three. Powerlifting was amazing. There was an incredible community at my school. I was loving my body more. I loved training for performance, but it had a negative effect on my body, I think because of how hard I was pushing myself, and I ended up messing up one of my knees. During my recovery from my knee issue, I missed running, and so I got back into running when I could, when I was healed up and ready to go, and that kind of brought me to where I am today. Rock climbing also came into the picture right after COVID, and that fed into my performance-oriented training perfectly. It was also so fun and so mentally stimulating figuring out routes. That stuck around the entire time. So at that point, I was weight training to stay functional and strong. I was climbing because I loved it and it was also amazing for my fitness. And I was running because I loved it and it was amazing cardio. Those three things have been my main goals and training ever since. Of course, I've run into roadblocks with injury, with training too hard, with not training properly. But in general, those three things have kept me feeling the healthiest and strongest and most functional of my entire life. That brings me to today where I'm starting to train for an ultra marathon once again after coming back from a big injury. I'm climbing all the time. I love it. I'm really pushing my grades and trying to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And I'm using weight training to maintain basic fitness and supplement both climbing and running. So after that entire story, what do I think are the key parts of my success in terms of being an athlete? What are the big failures I've had? And how do I obtain this level of fitness and physique? The biggest setbacks that have been within my own control have all been related to me pushing myself too hard and injuring something. When I do too much, when I push myself past a barrier or a boundary that I know I'm not ready to push past yet, that I'm not trained enough to push past, I've consistently been put on the bench for weeks at a time, months at a time because I was injured. And those setbacks suck. They're expensive, they take a lot of time, nobody wants to be injured. The other side of that, however, is I think my greatest success and the reason that I've been able to achieve anything in terms of my physique, my fitness, whatever. That success is consistency over time. I've been training for almost 2 decades now in some form, and I've stayed consistent throughout that entire period. Literally, the only time I can think of where I wasn't injured, that I was having downtime, was when I was in high school. I spent one summer just surfing. That's still active, that's still a sport. But, it wasn't fully training in my opinion, so we're going to count that as like downtime. Regardless of that, I've been training in some form for almost the entirety of the last 20 years. With that amount of consistency over that amount of time, I think anyone is going to have a significant impact on their physique and their fitness. Given that entire story, it makes sense that it's relatively easy for me to maintain my fitness. I pretty much just have to keep it up. And of course, I love to push myself, I love to have new goals, but just being consistent and continuing to do that for the rest of my life is the main goal. So when it comes to takeaways for other people, I think, of course, not pushing yourself too hard, knowing your limits, and not pushing past them until you're ready, until you're trained up and properly programmed, coached, whatever to do that is key. Making sure injuries don't happen is always a primary concern. But more than anything, I think it's just about showing up consistently and doing that over a long period of time. Given that kind of commitment, dedication, time, I think you can achieve almost anything in fitness. That being said, I can't wait to make more videos on more specific aspects of how I'd approach fitness, how I'd approach getting into it, getting more advanced with it, whatever you might need. Make sure to leave a comment telling me what you want to hear more about, what you want to learn more about, and what you learned from this long story of my training in my life. I really hope that was helpful. Thank you for being here, and as always, have a great day.